Our law and justice lead now. The deadliest anti-Semitic attack in American history is getting its moment in court. Today, opening statements began in the trial for the admitted gunman who shot and killed 11 people at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh in October 2018. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. CNN's Danny Freeman was in the courthouse today, where the scene was both emotional and intense.
4.5 years after the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in modern U.S. history, the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting trial finally began this morning. Loved ones of the victims arriving with police escorts and hugging each other in front of the court.
Today is another chapter, and hopefully almost a final or closing chapter of what happened 4.5 years ago.
Defendant Robert Bowers, accused of killing 11 Jewish worshippers and wounding several others in October 2018, sat in the courtroom wearing a collared shirt and an olive sweater, actively speaking with his attorneys. All while the government graphically laid out the deadly rampage he's accused of committing. Federal prosecutors said in the months leading up to the shooting, Bowers looked up Jewish organizations and posted anti-Semitic and anti-immigrant rhetoric online. Then, that Saturday morning, Bowers armed himself with several handguns, an AR-15, and a shotgun and drove to the synagogue. The prosecution said Bowers then methodically went through the synagogue and hunted Jewish worshippers, sometimes shooting victims at such close range they had singe marks from the rifle that killed them. 97-year-old Rose Mallinger was shot through the head while hiding behind a pew. Her daughter hid from Bowers under her body.
It's a very horrific crime scene. It's one of the worst that I've seen.
After a shootout with members of the Pittsburgh police SWAT team, Bowers surrendered. An officer asked him why he had done this. Prosecutor Sue Song told jurors he responded in part, "All Jews need to die. The Jews are killing our kids." In her opening statement, Bowers' defense attorney Judy Clark called her client's actions incomprehensible and inexcusable, saying there will be no doubt as to who shot 11 congregants and wounded 7 others. But Clark said the jury must determine if his, quote, irrational motive and his misguided intent applies to the federal charges Bowers faces. 22 of the 63 charges against Bowers are eligible for the death penalty. Steve Cohen is the co-president of New Light, one of the 3 congregations attacked at the synagogue that day.
It's like today is a beautiful day. There's not a cloud in the sky. It's sunny, it's warm, but there's this huge cloud that sits over our head. It's an ugly, gray, rainy, sleet-filled cloud. And we want that cloud to go away. This is the beginning of that process.
Now, Jake, court just adjourned today for the afternoon, and I gotta say, it's been an intense day for the opening day of this trial, and I just want to express one thing and to illustrate how intense and emotional this day was. We heard a 911 call from 84-year-old Bernice Simon from inside that synagogue that day. She was calling as the shooter. You can hear on the 911 call, it was shooting all across the synagogue. She said, "I'm scared to death," and then we heard that phone go silent when she was ultimately killed. Jake?
Danny Freeman, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's bring in CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig and Michael Bernstein, who's the chair of the Tree of Life Interim Governance Committee, which is an organization that grew from this horrible tragedy. Elie, you heard the defense argue that the admitted gunman had, quote, misguided intent, acknowledging that he wanted to kill Jews, but saying he did so because, quote, he somehow believed they were doing something so disastrously wrong, devastating to others and to children that he had to act, unquote. What do you make of this defense?
Well, Jake, every criminal defendant is entitled to a defense. It's an important part of our constitutional democracy. I think this particular defense is truly preposterous. It's not even an actual defense to argue that someone acted for misguided or irrational reasons. I mean, the vast majority of murders are done for irrational, misguided reasons. The vast majority of all crimes fall in that category. Imagine if it was a defense. We live in chaos, and it's important to understand what this is not. This is not an insanity or mental incapacity defense, because in the federal system, if you're going to raise that kind of defense, you have to serve formal notice to the judge and the prosecutor in advance. That's not been done here, so this is a different kind of defense, and I think it's very, very likely to fail.
Michael, you live near the synagogue. You've talked about how you could hear the gunshots the morning of the shooting. How is the Jewish community of Pittsburgh, the Tree of Life Synagogue community doing right now as this trial begins?
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Well, I think the community is certainly on edge. We've been waiting a long time for this trial, and I know the families of the victims as well as the survivors It's a very emotional time. At the same time, we're a strong community. We are truly blessed here in Pittsburgh to not only have a strong Jewish community, but I think the broader community as well. And so over the last 4.5 years, we've been held by our neighbors and by others. And so I think we're ready for this. And as Stephen Cohen said, just leading up to this, I think we're ready to get this behind us so we can move on.
And Elie, we need to remember the context because it's important here. This is October 2018. Many figures on the right wing of this country, politicians and right-wing media, were focused at that moment on a caravan of migrants coming to the U.S. with the fear-mongering allegation that this was all funded by George Soros and other wealthy Jews as part of this deranged white replacement theory, changing the demographics of America. It seems as though the defense is leading up to saying, look, this false theory was out there, my client acted on it, but he didn't make up this insane conspiracy theory.
That is what it seems like the defense is, Jake. The defense lawyer actually made an interesting strategic decision. She essentially said to the jury, my client has had firearms for a long time. He's been an anti-Semite for a long time, but he didn't actually take action until he essentially started going online and was weaponized. Now, again, that's not technically a defense. The fact that somebody's radicalized by things they see is not a criminal defense. I think what the defense lawyer is trying to do here is set the stage for sentencing, where she will argue my client was weak-minded and he gave in to these things he saw online, and therefore you should sentence him to life in jail instead of death.
Speaking of the death penalty, Michael, family members of 9 of the 11 victims, 9 of them have called for the gunman to receive the death penalty. But leaders from 2 of the Jewish congregations affected by the shooting, the Dor Hadash and New Light congregation, asked the federal government to not seek the death penalty. Is there a consensus view in the Jewish community? And as a Jew, let me say, I know it's troubling to ever ask for a consensus among our people, but is there a view that is prevailing?
Well, I think, as you indicate, I mean, people have different perspectives and views on it. And honestly, for me, you know, I'm not one of the families that was directly affected. And so it's hard for me to say one way or the other what it is. I think the consensus is certainly that this person has to be held accountable for their actions, and let the Justice Department figure out how to do that best.
Michael Bernstein, Elie Honig, good to see both of you. Thank you so much for discussing a difficult day and a difficult event. Appreciate it.